Welcome back to MythVision Podcast. Your host, Derek Lambert. We're going to have a blast today. One of these topics blew my mind that was mentioned by our guest, and I was like, whoa, how come I never heard of this? Never really went into this whole idea. And that idea is that King David was bisexual. In fact, he loved Jonathan more than any woman and vice versa. So we're going to be discussing that, of course, and much more in her book, which is Crucifying the Bible. Highly recommend getting it in paperback. It's not a thick read. Like, it's really simple. A lot of boxes in there with scriptures telling you and showing you contradictions and all sorts of stuff, which we'll discuss today. And I appreciate everybody who's tuning in. Make sure you hit that like button as you tune in. Help us grow. Drop a comment. Share it with somebody who will get triggered. I'm sure they're out there. And we'll go ahead and start jumping into here shortly. I want everybody to check out my Patreon, of course. Help support us here. Countless videos going on and on. I've got one right now on the Shroud of Turin that is going to blow the socks off of the Otangelos in the world. Obviously, cognitive dissonance is going to set in, and they're just not going to see it. But help us out. Go support us there and get the book we're going to be talking about today, Crucifying the Bible, using the Bible to disprove the Bible. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. And with that, our guest, Deborah Grace, welcome back to MythVision Podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be back.
I'm glad you're back, and we're hanging out. We're going live. Everybody can tune in, throw up comments, chats. They have questions they can ask. But before we get started, let's go ahead and do our intro.
Don't any of you have the guts to pay for blood?
I'm your huckleberry. That's just my game.
We are MythVision. Welcome back to MythVision Podcast. I'm your host, Derek Lambert. I already see we got a few people who are saying, leave David alone. And they got the smiley face, Faithful Theology said. Also, the Aquarian TV, I just spoke with Adam Green 30 minutes ago on the phone for about 30, 40 minutes. I don't get the whole, my guy will beat your guy and this and this and that. It just is silly. Anyway, that's not what we're here for, but I just wanted to address those things and point out, like, I'm actually on the phone in contact with gentlemen like Adam Green and others in their positions. So thank you, everybody who's tuning in. I appreciate it. Love you guys. I hope you're having a wonderful holidays and enjoying this season. It's like 70 degrees outside, and I can wear a t-shirt. What the heck's going on? How are you doing, Deborah?
I'm great. It's much colder in my house than it is outside, so I'm wearing a sweater.
It's wild. My brother's got snow on the ground over there in Washington State, and I'm like, geez, it's definitely not like that here. Really
not
interesting.
in North Carolina, no.
No. I titled this at first just Crucifying the Bible because the title of your book is Crucifying the Bible. And you got this bull here pulling down, it seems, this cross. Like, what's the imagery here? What's the meaning?
The golden bull all grown up causing mayhem. The bull in the china shop, mess with the bull, get the horns. You name the metaphor, it all applies, really.
Wow. Yeah, I love it. This is really well written, and it's really pretty book. But I changed it from just Crucifying the Bible to King David, bisexual King David. You're the first person that has ever actually I've heard it, but it was like, these are just atheists, just trying to poke holes at the Bible. They're just, ignorant, trying to mock and stuff. And I, as an atheist, will be very cautious when I hear things, even from atheists. That's just me, because I know that there's this antagonism, and you kind of have to take everything with a grain of salt. They're upset, they're triggered, or they're angry, so they're going to say anything. And sometimes they go too far, and they just don't accurately get information. Right. So then you said it, and I was like, hold on. Tell me, back this up. So maybe we'll start with King David, and then we'll work into whatever the audience wants to ask questions. Feel free to super chat your questions and we'll go from there.
Sure. So there's quite a bit in several chapters in the Bible. I dedicated a single chapter to that topic, but there's a lot to it. It talks about that they made a covenant with each other. That's really how it all starts. They made a covenant with each other, and then he strips the bow, the sword, the girdle, all of it, and they kiss. And Jonathan and them, they go back and forth talking about each other, singing their praises about each other, and then it seems like King Saul gets wise to their whole relationship, and he asks him about it, and he's like, oh no, King David's in Bethlehem, they're having a feast, whatever. And apparently King Saul was not okay with the answer, because he has this huge outburst, and he talks about, you son of the perverse and rebellious woman, do you think that I do not know you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own confusion and unto the confusion of your mother's nakedness? That doesn't sound like just a jealous father. It doesn't sound like about a friendship. He's literally talking about, you're not doing what a mother and father do. You're going against nature.
Mm-hmm.
You're having this relationship. And King Saul goes so far to break up this relationship between his son and King David that he gave him his own daughter. Now, we understand through this whole story of King David that King Saul is jealous of King David and goes so far as to try to kill him on numerous occasions. Mm-hmm. But then why would you give King David your own daughter in marriage, who he abandons per the story?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reading that chapter that you have. And of course, there's one minor textual thing you're going to be correcting scripture-wise, but it doesn't change the conclusion.
No. Right.
That really is an interesting way of presenting this. I thought about it. They get naked together. Is that common?
Hides him. They meet in secret. Like, you don't do that. You don't weep in each other's arms. You don't kiss each other. You don't embrace each other. None of that if it's just a friendship. And why would you hide in secret if it's a friendship?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because if what you're suggesting is accurate, and it seems like there could be a real good case here that you've made, wouldn't that mean that all these Christians out here that are slapping LGBTQ and people who are identifying or are interested in same-sex relationships, that's highly hypocritical if their very king, who is after God's own heart, according to their own text,
right,
is legitimately doing the thing that they're trying to attack?
Sure.
And the guy who's in trouble is Saul. It's like, wouldn't you think David be the guy that would be the one that, I mean, I guess maybe they could make a case if they accepted the premise. Well, the reason his firstborn was killed is because of this sin, but wasn't that because he took the other man's wife? Doesn't it explain why his firstborn was actually killed? Was because he took the other man's wife. It's not because he loved Jonathan.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, there's when David went to the priests and said, hey, feed me and my men, one of the things that the priest asked him was like, well, all I have is the showbread, but you can't have the showbread unless you have not been with women. And David's like, no, I've not been with a woman. Well, you were just married. How were you not with a woman? So, I mean, I don't know how much time had passed between the time he left and escaped and went to see the priest. It didn't say, but he clearly said, no, my men and I haven't been with women in a couple of days. I just thought that was an odd little tidbit of information to throw in there in the narrative, unless they were trying to low-key make this point. Yeah.
This is a big deal. This is a big deal. Take us through, if you can, like, tell us the story in some poetic way, I guess, of David and Jonathan, the way you see it and what happened, and then we'll venture off wherever you want to go.
Well, the story seems to me to take place at the very beginning of the covenant. Like, it just jumps right into this covenant, and then they strip and they kiss, and it goes on to say that they meet in secret, and they are having these intimate conversations, talking with each other about how much he loves him. Don't take your kindness away from me. David, or I think it was Jonathan who made David promise twice, don't take your kindness from me. It means so much to me. Don't take it away. And David says, yeah, I won't take it away. And so then Jonathan and David Jonathan and King Saul are eating dinner, and David's not there. And you see this narrative of King Saul going to kill David, and then he withdraws, and then he does it again. Well, at this dinner, Jonathan is telling his father, David's good, he's fine, he's okay. And King Saul says, okay, and his heart softens, and then Jonathan comes back. And then there's another dinner, and he's rekindled his anger toward David, and David is hiding away, and Jonathan's keeping his location a secret. And he's like, where's David? Oh, he's at a feast. And that's when the outburst happens. And then he knows he's going to, his father's going to go try to kill David again. And so he says, no, stay away. And then he, softens his father's heart again. And then David comes back. And then King Saul gives his daughter to David to marry. And they're in their room, and he says, I got to get away. He tells his new wife, Michal, or I don't know how, you have to let me go. And she's like, what do you mean? And he's like, I need to go. And if anybody asks you, tell them I tried to kill you if you didn't let me go. So he leaves. She lets him go. King Saul's like, where is he? She's like, he told me if I didn't let him go, he was going to kill me. So I let him go. And at that point, he's abandoning his own wife because he loves Jonathan so much. And then he has to go hide, and he goes to the priests, and the priests give him showbread because he hasn't been with a woman. And then King Saul chases him for 9 years. 9 years he's on his tail trying to kill him. And eventually, King David finds out that both King Saul and Jonathan have died. And then he weeps, and it's the most heart-wrenching prayer, cry. I loved this man more than I loved women.
Yeah.
And it's so tragic that 9 years of this guy's life while he's escaping, trying to get away from this king, he's king. Why did he have to be jealous over somebody? What, because a few women were crying and praying and worshiping and singing about, oh, King Saul killed 1,000, but David killed 10,000. Oh, well, grow up, be a man, get some thick skin. I don't think he was killing or going after King David because of a little jealousy. I think he did not want his son to be in a man-on-man relationship with this young man.
Is there other examples where, in your chapter, for example, Benjamites, I think and you can tell me where you might have made mistakes or whatever, if that's possible, but either way, you're making these corrections. It's nothing that big. Trust me.
Right.
People who watch me may not be an Aaronist, but either way, they'll get the gist. Was the condemnation of man with man something in the Benjamin tribes or the priest that he's trying to kill, or is that not clear?
Well, it is and it isn't. So I was corrected by somebody who went through and fact checked me. I asked to be fact checked. I'm like, okay, that's fine. King Saul was addressing his men and calling them Benjamites and not the priests. However, the entire tribe of Benjamin was almost completely eradicated because these men wanted to lay with other men, and a woman was a casualty when a Levitical priest offered up his concubine, and she was killed by the men of the city. And because of that, it had to do with, why did these guys go after, wanting to go after this man who was going through the city, and all the Benjamites would not they wouldn't acquiesce to taking ownership over what happened. And it appears to be an issue with being okay with homosexuality or being homosexual in and of itself. If King Saul was actually a Benjamite, then he would be that much more wanting to clear that stain on the record of the Benjamites.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, that still is just as valid in its premise and its conclusion as it was when I wrote the book. You still have that issue of...
You do have this issue, and I just want, for anyone who doesn't know, there's a few academics who have looked into the law, and I say the law as in like Deuteronomy, Leviticus, and things like this, and they have seen what they think is some redactional change taking place in these homosexual passages, and say that they think they were really originally incestual. Don't sleep with your father or your mother, these type of things. And they've been changed to be, quit it. Just women with women and men with men, just stop. Like, so I wonder if this is playing in that theme. This is quite interesting. We have some super chats if you want to jump on them.
Yeah.
Awesome. Aramgard, thank you for the super chat, my friend. What's Ahinoam's? How do you pronounce it? Ahinoam's role in this? She's Saul's wife, Jonathan's mom. But after Saul tries to kill David, we learn David now has a wife with the same name. I don't know. Is the hold on. Saul tries to kill David. We learn David now has a wife with the same name. Is the daughter named after the mother? I don't know.
Is that incest? Is that what the question is about? Is it?
No, I don't think it's that. I think they're trying to say, like, wondering if Saul's wife is actually David somehow marrying this woman that's Saul's wife. I don't really know. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Aramgard. I'll keep an eye out and try and see if you follow up with a response to this. But I've never dug into this in any depth here in particular.
I mean, I know the Bible repeats names over and over and over throughout the whole thing. And if this was something that redactors of the Bible wanted to sort of correct or make the scriptures in a better light, then, King David had a change of heart and married somebody with the same name to try to appease. I don't know. That's all speculation, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't really know either. I'll keep an eye out on Aramgard, see if he has any follow-up. So, Andrew, thank you for the super chat. Debs, I love your book. Audible user. I fully listened 4 times. I needed this book. Thank you. My only complaint is chapter 26 is pretty thin without reference chart.
Let's see. Was that one? Because I wrote out a bunch of scriptures in a few chapters, and I just thought, And I put that in the preface. I was like, if a chapter has enough scriptures written out in it, then it doesn't really need one.
Chapter 26 has.
Oh, it has a ton.
Yeah, I think it's a joke. Maybe, I don't know. They're probably being sarcastic. I don't know.
There wasn't a whole lot to write because the table said everything.
So yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, the one that's thin is 25, but that's because I wrote out a bunch there.
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much for the super chat, Andrew. I appreciate it. Melody Joy says, and thank you, Melody. I appreciate always seeing you in the chat and cheering us on here. Thanks for bringing another great guest, Derek. Loved Crucifying the Bible, Deborah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting book, and you can listen to it or you can get it in paperback. Either way. Doc Pleroma, the text says that they kissed each other until David became exceeded. In Hebrew, large, gadol, if you know what I mean.
I didn't want to add that. I thought it was a little too much.
Wow.
Yeah.
Never heard of this. This is why I'm like, okay, let me dive into this because this is be really interesting to talk about. I never ever did I go into this. So hold on. Aramgar says, I've got quite an echo coming from your side. I don't know if it's, I think it's coming through your audio or something. Aramgar says, Baden talked about it in his Samuel book. Jonathan's mother is Ahinoam. I hope I'm saying that right. And when David is fleeing from Saul in the wilderness, the text just casually drops that David has a wife named Ahinoam. Does the plot thicken? You know, it's almost like, did he take his wife and his son? I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying. It's interesting.
I don't know. That to me, I mean, this is just me spitballing off the top of my head, but why would they add that unless they're trying to take away from David having this relationship with Jonathan?
Yeah, you know what interests me is there's two stories of David, as Joel Baden talks about. There's one where he is not a good person. No matter what you do, you read it, this guy is not good. And then there's another, and I can't remember if it's Samuel or Kings. Maybe I've got these mixed up. But in the other one, they whitewash David and actually make him out to be a hero, a man after God's own heart. Like he's this great guy. But really, was he? You know, if we really looked at this guy, at what now, of course, a Christian will come along. Of course, he wasn't. Even Paul wasn't a good guy. He says, I'm desperately wicked and I continually, you know, I'm a wretch and all that kind of stuff. But that's not the point. That's not what we're trying to say. What we're saying is this guy's actions in real life, if there was a King David, and I go with Joel Baden, there's nothing wrong, in my opinion, to say that he probably was, but it doesn't look good. This guy does not look good, and then he looks good all of a sudden in later literature.
Right. When he's, you know, when he's eyeing Bathsheba while she's taking a bath and sending her husband out to the front lines of the battle to be killed, that's not a good guy. That's not somebody who you would want as the ancestral lineage for your Messiah. But I mean, but then again, if you look at Luke 19:22, he's like, those who don't submit to me, bring them before me and slay them. So, you know, there's a lot to be said that Jesus wasn't a great guy either. He's calling Gentile women dogs. I mean, it's not pretty.
Yeah, if that goes back to the man, yeah.
Right.
Hey, Aaron, thank you for the super chat. Don't you think that the book of Samuel is filled with internal contradictions?
Yeah.
Who killed Goliath? Did is it Michael die childless or not? Mini doublets, etc. I definitely think there's a lot of that. I mean, they don't know who. There's also like textual issues when you go from the Septuagint to the Hebrew, but yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of problems with that. Isn't it also in Kings and Samuel where God tells David a number and the other one says to Satan? It's like, you know, that's kind of a big deal, getting God and Satan mixed up here. I don't know, you know.
Well, there was a a law in Torah that said that if you're going to take a census, then everybody has to give what they are worth monetarily to the temple at the same time. So either way you spin it, whether God told him to or whether Satan told him to, he didn't even dedicate the people at the same time. So wasn't following Torah either. But I do have that Goliath contradiction in my book too.
What chapter was that in?
It's in God Contradicts God.
Okay. Your titles are funny too. Oh, you've got some really good ones.
That's just part of me.
You even have one where you're like rambling. You're like, I'm just rambling at this. Like on this is like ramblings or whatever. There's a lot of cool, funny stuff. Just pointing out.
One of my favorites is love and hate, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure Jesus hates. I'm pretty sure Jesus hates. I'm pretty sure Jesus hates. I had to throw that in there. That was my best funny that I still chuckle reading it.
Yeah, when you can make hate not mean hate, that's, I mean, like when words stop meaning words, that's when you know you're doing good apologetics. You know what I mean?
Tell me you don't like without telling me you don't like.
Exactly. Well, I kindly despise you. You're despicable to me, but I don't mean it that way. I mean it in a kind way. You know,
give my scraps to the dogs.
Oh man. Yeah. What else are we not touching on in that story? Because I'd like to get a little bit into your background as well, just for our audience to know more about you. You have an interesting story. So is there anything we're missing on David?
Well, I opened the whole chapter with my evolution in my belief and my understanding and tolerance of gays. I was so against the homosexual community because my faith told me I had to be. That I had like a 3-day long debate with somebody who used to be a relative of mine. And because of that 3-day debate, I was uninvited to her wedding. And seeing my evolution in acceptance and understanding that I was just fully bigoted to that regard, and then realizing that this entire book is just filled with hate and bigotry and selective supremacy and pseudo righteousness, that I had to wake up to not just my entire belief system is fake. I had to evolve as a person and go, oh
yeah,
I was hateful. I was fully hateful.
Me too. I'm with you. I know exactly what you're talking about. And I'm glad that we've come so far where we are now, realizing, oh my goodness, the world, you know, it's our perception that counts. It's our perception that matters. The world we live in is what mattered. And of course, based on these texts, these ancient texts, man, it's a whole paradigm shift to start allowing and being not just like, oh, okay, I'm okay with those people. No, like actually loving those people and becoming close and having friendships with people who have different preferences.
Fight for them.
Yep.
And fight for their right to be.
Yeah.
I'm correcting those wrongs by writing the book and by being outspoken about it.
You're doing a lot here. And I want to get this super chat as this takes us into your story, because I have a lot in common with you in many ways. And then there's in many ways that you've done things I didn't do or didn't go down those paths. But let's get to that in just a second. Jason Stewart, thank you for the super chat. Rabbi Tobias Singer, and I interviewed him yesterday live, right? I did a whole 3-hour episode. I love the guy.
I was so, I saw that today. I was like, I got to watch it later.
I want to say something real quick. As we get into this is something important. You know, I'm a recovering drug addict, over 6 years clean off heroin. I could look at drug addicts and say, you know what? I empathize. That doesn't mean I agree with what they're doing and the lifestyle that they're harming themselves and the family around them, etc. But at the same time, I love them. I care about them. I have friendship with people who are active in addiction right now that you would look at and go get a job. Just quit doing drugs. people who say that honestly don't understand. And I get it. I can't blame them either. But there's
Right.
there's this big ignorance on all of this. I say that to say I love Rabbi Tovia Singer. I don't conclude at all the worldview that he goes by. I love
Right.
having him come talk about the New Testament and what we're going to be talking about here with Paul, homosexuality and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
I want to say that, like, I platform these people to come and talk because I think he has a very keen eye on things in the New Testament.
Yeah.
Some of the things he says, I don't agree with, and I haven't openly said these things to him while he's on the episode, but there are some things that he might say, and I think, is that anachronistic? Is that Orthodox Judaism, Rabbinic Judaism, peeping into his interpretation of the New Testament? You know, these are things that I have, but it's still fascinating to have him come on and discuss these things. So I want to say that for our audience who might be tuning in, that is a fan of him, they might also agree with what I'm saying. But he says Rabbi Tovia Singer believes the thorn in the flesh of Paul was most likely his homosexual attraction. Thoughts? What are your thoughts about that?
I actually agree with that. You have Paul traveling with men, his ministry. He had a disagreement with was it Bartholomew? No. I think it was Bartholomew. He had a disagreement with, and then he would, in diva fashion, he's like, I'm not going to travel with him anymore. I'm not. It's like, okay, well, did they have a lover's quarrel? I don't know, but you have Paul that is quite obviously anti-women throughout the whole New Testament. He doesn't seem to like them very much, unless they're like super very devout or whatever. He doesn't seem to paint them in a very good picture. Stay silent, don't teach, be shamefaced. Like, are you not going to tell the men to be shamefaced? It's just the women, like, cover up. And
there's a lot of scholars who think that, like, some of that stuff was written by church fathers and that Paul himself didn't write it. But I can't make a position for sure on what I think about Paul, what Paul really, he could be.
He could be. And at the same time, we also don't know, we're not privy to any of the letters that provoked his responses. We're not privy to any of the other communications between the churches and Paul. So what sparked it? And in what context are these things being said and being instructed? So context is everything, but we don't have it.
Mm-hmm. No, we don't. There's so much we're missing too. Like every expert I talk about on Paul, they tell me, they're like, we don't know what he really thought about this. And in fact, there's people like E.P. Sanders who like delved into Paul exhaustively, who walk away and say, we're not even sure if what Paul's saying he believes on some points. He might be manipulating his audience. We don't know. So how much can you really know about someone or something when what they're saying may not be what they actually practice or what they actually think? Right. If I was writing you letters to butter you up and I'm just BSing you, you'll never know what I really thought if all you have left are the butter up messages that I'm giving you. And it seems like all we have are these little glimpses of nothing, pretty much. It's just barely anything. So it's difficult to peer in. But at the end of the day, Rabbi does think that Paul is hiding this shame, this thorn in his flesh, which might be the sin of sexual attraction to men. And it's possible. I don't rule it out. He sees things I don't. At the end of the day, though, one of the things that I do notice, though, coming from an Orthodox Jewish perspective, and I think this is sometimes anachronistic, the Talmud, the Mishnah, and things like that may play a role in their interpretation of these things. Not sure. I wonder, because as I delve into this more, I'll probably learn this. I kind of wonder if I've heard some Orthodox Jews say that Paul was prophesied in the Hebrew Bible to be this false Balaam prophet to come. And so there seems to be this, I guess you could say, this prophetic expectation for Paul to come on the scene. And what was to be expected? Well, he was full of licentiousness or something. There's other words. Like, so I wonder if that interpretation of him being a prophetic false prophet is also influencing his interpretation on Paul. And it's not really from Paul as much as it is from the interpretation that Jews have had on the Hebrew scriptures back onto Paul. I don't know. I'm highly skeptical.
Well, I mean, if you look at the tests that we're supposed to do per the Old Testament, per I think Deuteronomy and a couple other places too, the testing that we're supposed to have on people who call themselves prophets, there's not much there to it, but what you say has to follow the law and the prophets, and if you have a prophecy, it needs to come true. So based on those, not only would Paul fall under the category of false prophet, but so does Jesus.
Yeah. I'm with you 1,000,000% on that. I am so convinced of this at this point. I used to be convinced that everything was fulfilled because I wanted to keep the Bible alive. And it just, nope, fell apart after you start poking and realizing, oh my goodness, there's a problem here. It was Barnabas.
Yes, thank you. I knew it started with a B.
Thank you so much for the super chat. Chindi, I hope I'm saying that right. Chindi. Thank you for the super chat. I apologize if I butchered your name, and do appreciate that. Look, I have fun doing this. We got one more here. Vaguely Agnostic is back. I love seeing names that keep coming back. I love seeing that. Thank you for the support. 666. I came to that homosexual innuendo about Paul during my deconstruction over 40 years ago.
Wow.
Nice to hear the world catch up. Oh, man. Well, it is interesting. It depends on how you interpret things. And I'll say this. I'll shut up. I'd love to have your thoughts. The fact that he had this idea, don't get married, he almost is saying, stop reproducing. Like, cut it out. What is this? Is this a religious, what we see at monks and stuff? And is his doctrine, wherever he's picking up this idea, either it's apocalyptic causing him to say this, or is this like a weird, strange doctrine, which leads people, like you'd look at a priest. You might say a priest that gets caught doing something. Okay.
Yeah.
You catch a priest doing something. Were they initially homosexual, let's say, or did the doctrine of forcing them to be sexually frustrated for endless amount of years, and the people they're around are little children all the time or something, cause them to finally go that route? Don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but it makes me wonder if Paul's doctrine has caused him to go that route.
Well, so what is the very first command? The very first command in the Bible, in our canon Bible, not chronologically. What's the first command?
You love the Lord thy God, you talking about?
Be fruitful and multiply.
You're talking Genesis, so okay. Yeah.
So if the very first command is to be fruitful and multiply, and you have this Johnny-come-lately Paul saying, well, don't be married unless you're going to burn for somebody else and you can't control yourself. Well, that goes against the very first command. So based on that one thing alone, Paul's writings should have been thrown out.
Yeah.
But if you're going to be sexually frustrated for God knows how many years, and there's no command into Old Testament Torah that says you can't diddle young people, I mean, he remains silent. God remains silent on child rape. Don't eat shellfish, but not a peep about having sex with children. So if a priest goes through and understands the Bible, has no command and no restriction against that, but he's not supposed to, burn for somebody else, that sexual frustration for somebody else, and he's not supposed to get married, then who else is left but little kids? It's disgusting, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that sucks. That sucks. Glad I never became a priest.
I know. I actually thought about becoming a nun when I was like 17 years old.
That brings me to the question about you.
Catholic.
I know, you're just like, they're so holy acting. I want to be righteous for God. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Sound of Music, though, too.
Your story as a Christian, can you tell everybody, some of our watchers probably never watched our first episode. What was the kind of Christianity you were in, or if it was various, try to somehow get through those, and then tell us what happened when you left Christianity and started to maybe look at Judaism as an alternative. And then what happened from there?
Right. So I grew up in evangelical, fundamentalist Christian churches. The earliest one that I can think of was a little peace evangelical type church in Southern California. And it was evangelical. They had an intercessory prayer group for the women that my mom led. So that's pretty powerful when you have the women's intercessory prayer type group. And then I went to like New Hope and New Life and a couple of little fundamentalist evangelical churches in rural Colorado. And I was baptized 6 times throughout my life, and
had to make sure you were saved. You know what I mean?
Well, you go through so many years, and you're like, I want to feel fresh again, and
yeah,
a few of those when I was really young. But we had Bible studies in our home. When I was a kid, we'd play Bible trivia, and my dad wrote Christian music, and we went from church to church to share that with other congregations, and opened up our home to other people, trying to share the word of God with them. My mom got her boss to be saved, and now she runs a missionary church, or helps run a missionary church in Arizona.
Your mom?
No, my mom's friend or boss, who she got saved.
Did your mom wake up?
No, my mom passed away when she was in the Hebrew Roots movement. Yeah. So
sorry to hear that.
That's okay. That's a whole other story, and it is quite beautiful, but she was the one that opened up that Hebrew Roots chapter to me. And she converted 14 years before I did. So I knew a lot about the things that she was honoring, the feasts and Passover and Day of Atonement and Hanukkah. That's more of a tradition, but she followed it. And so I would wrap up her gifts in brown paper and string because she loved the sound of music. And it's kind of a Hanukkah, you're not putting a certain Christmas paper on it. So, but it was everything. It was from the time I woke up to the time I, went to bed, that I wanted to be the best version of myself, the best Christian, godly woman I could be for years. And
how old are you at this point? Like, are you in the Hebrew Roots movement at this point? And how old are you?
So I was a follower of the Bible for 41 years. And it wasn't until I was 34, 35 that I started really contemplating and really moving my life over into that Hebrew Roots journey. And I didn't do it until a pretty heavy breakup in my life. And I was like, this is obviously not working for me. I'm trying to follow God. I'm trying to honor everything that I know to honor. And I'm still not seeing the promises that God lays out in Deuteronomy 28, 1-14. So what the heck? I guess I'm not doing it right. I'm going to do what my mom's doing, and maybe then I'll start saying the blessings. And it was good because, that breakup years ago, I didn't even want to do Christmas.
You were so into this movement.
I didn't know. I was so heartbroken by everything that had my life had pretty much crashed around me, and I was taking care of my mom while she was sick. And because it was such a traumatizing part of my life, I was like, I just gave away all my Christmas stuff and said, I'm just going to take that next step. I'm just going to convert over myself and start from scratch
To Judaism.
to Judaism.
Okay, so that we're on the same page.
To Hebrew roots.
Okay, so you're a typical Christian, but
Typical
serious.
Christian.
And then
Typical
now you're
Christian,
like,
serious.
I got to get more into this Bible. And when you say Bible, you mean Hebrew scriptures. So now you're starting to go that direction.
Right. And follow past. Well, we did Passover when I was a kid a couple of times, but I wanted to follow the Feast of Tabernacles. I wanted to follow the counting of the Omar. I wanted to count the Day of Atonement. I wanted to do Feast of Tabernacles. I wanted to do the whole 9 and do that conversion over. And that was a great time for me to do it.
And you did it.
Yeah, I did it. Yeah.
Okay. How long were you in the Hebrew roots?
Almost 6 years. So
briefly give us about that, because your life is a long video that we could really get into. But in the 6-year time, tell us your experience, and then what happened that made you go, man, this isn't right.
Well, after I had healed licked my wounds and healed, I said, I have bombed in the relationship aspect of my life up until now. Nothing seems to be really working out. So I'm going to try and meet somebody who also is Hebrew roots.
This is getting interesting. Okay, so you meet somebody who's in Hebrew roots, and are they as dedicated, or are you guys competing for who's more dedicated?
Oh no, he's in the other room right now.
Can we get the privilege to wave and say hey to him? Is that possible, or is he?
Yeah.
Okay, I'd love to meet your husband.
All right. Hang on 1 second. Let me go get him.
Awesome. This is awesome. Thank you, everybody, tuning in. This is wonderful. Deborah Grace. This is her book, Crucifying the Bible. It's not too big. Get it on Audible. Check it out on paperback. Her husband came up with the title, Crucifying the Bible. And so we're going to meet her husband, who was also in the Hebrew roots. And this, I'm loving the way this is going. This is going from Hebrew roots, and we already know it's going to head toward Judaism. And then, of course, something else happens. Boom. Head explodes. So we're lucky we get to meet her and her wonderful significant other.
Yes. Yeah, he's coming. Hold on 1 second.
All right. I feel like I'm being bleached out by this light. Let me see if I can tone it down a little. There we go. I'm not as bleached out. Yeah, your walk is very unique. Well, it's probably not unique if you take everybody's experiences, but this is really cool. You met someone who was a Jesus freak like you, right, but yet was still Hebrew-ish.
Right. I'm just gonna move this around a little bit. And
okay.
Not a Jesus freak, man. Nah.
Hey.
My husband.
Where we at here?
Can we get him on? There he is.
All right.
Nice to meet you. Yeah. Hey, so it worked. That means where the story's heading, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Through it all, they figured it out and they made it work. So congratulations, honestly.
Yeah, man. Hey, so how many people are looking at here right now?
312 people are watching right now.
Right. Okay.
He's like, okay, see you later. Hey, it's really nice to meet you, though. Seriously,
you too, man. You got questions, or what's going on?
No, just simply wanted to introduce you. First of all, wonderful title. Great title. You come up with a name. It's unique.
Yeah,
and then also
she was basically, writing it up, and hey, got some feedback. Hey, check out what I wrote today. And this goes on for days upon days and months, and it's like one day I was just like, man, what you're doing is crucifying the Bible. and then it was, and she's like, yeah, I am. I said, in fact, that might be your name. And there it was.
Yeah.
So
I want to say congratulations. And also, I'm glad that you stuck with each other, both of you, and made it through and started to realize there's a bigger world out there than the one we were all living in. So
Yeah.
maybe one day we get you on here with her and we go further. But I just wanted to introduce you to the audience. And of course, I haven't met you yet. And I'm really, really glad that I did get to at least put a face to the
Right on.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can certainly do that. I'd welcome that. And we can be an interesting conversation, and just know that life is better. Life is so much better when you're free.
Yeah.
And truly, it was a significant change in how you interact with others and how they interact with you, and not that that's that important, from an introverted perspective, but I'm just saying it's you find yourself, at least I did find myself, judging a lot less, in fact almost to zero. And that's where the rubber hit the road, kind of thing, when I really realized how much all that impacted us. So
well said. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you. And
you too.
We're carrying on with the story. I got to get yours someday.
Right on. Yeah, for sure. We're in the same state, so
exactly.
There's no excuse.
No excuse. No excuse. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
You too.
Thank you so much for doing that, Deborah, and your husband. Yeah, thank him for that. And I'm going to give a shout out to a couple people here. Susan Bailey, thank you so much for the super chat or super sticker. I appreciate the support, the love. I love this stuff. Seriously. William Arons, thank you for the super chat. Doesn't the acknowledged adultery of David and the excessive polygamy of Solomon make them less than righteous and kosher in their carnal activities?
Yeah.
I don't know. How's that fit? How does that fit inside of the law? I mean,
well, if you look at our current or even when we're in Christianity, when we're looking at like Mormonism or some of the other cults that allow polygamy, we're looking at that like, no, God only gave one wife to Eve. He may have allowed it later, but how is that? That wasn't the original intent. It was 2 by 2 into the ark,
right?
So if you're looking at it that way, and some of them may have had multiple wives, but excessive polygamy, God said not even to have many, many horses, don't fill many hills with many horses. And King Solomon did anyway. And he followed his wives and their worship of their gods. And that wasn't something that God wanted or agreed with or accepted. So you're looking at that going, huh? How do we look at Solomon and David and say these were righteous? They weren't.
Yeah. So this is TMI for the whole world. When I was younger, I've been married to my wife almost 16 years now. When I was younger, I was a wild young man, and I had a wandering eye. And me and my wife would argue. We're young. We had kids. We were young. We didn't have money. We were struggling. We're just what happens. So you fight and you split up for a short time. And when you do, you go off and you're a young man. So I'm not a priest. I'm not going to sexually frustrate myself. I did what I did.
Right.
And I would have these conversations. These are real honest. I wouldn't make this up. This is kind of embarrassing, but it's just honestly. I would tell my mom would try to tell me, Derek, stop. This is wrong. You shouldn't do that. You should care about the people you're going to be with and things like that. She's trying to talk to me. And I remember using David as my justification. I'm not kidding. I used to say, well, David was after God's own heart, and yet he did far worse than what I'm doing. I would make these justifications and show if David was after God's own heart and he was doing this, he even killed the husband. Okay, he had the husband killed. Technically, he's guilty of murder.
Right.
Or you look at these guys like Solomon, I'd go, he has 1,000 wives. Come on, how bad is it what I'm doing? It's not that bad. I would use these as justifications in the, most Christians wouldn't do that, but I'm saying I would do anything. I lived within that Bible framework to try and explain these things. And I
Right.
thought to myself years later, as I started deconverting, how wise could Solomon be? I remember talking to a Muslim when I was in Afghanistan in 2010, and you're not allowed to drink on Bagram, which is the base there. It was first controlled by Russia, and then we came in. And anyway, I was in the mailroom and found some liquor, and I was a little bit sauced up. Went to go use the restroom, and was talking to this guy who could barely speak English. And I said, "Don't lie to me, man. How many wives do you have?" And he's like, "I have 3." And I was like, "Man, we can't even keep up with one in America." You know, we were joking and laughing, but
Yeah.
1,000? You know, it just kind of blew my mind a little bit. And yet he's the wisest man on earth, or according to the Bible, kind of hard to swallow.
Right. So let's look at this even a little bit further. Apparently, God hates unequal weights and measures. And I know that a lot of people are like, well, that refers to money, and that refers to the exchange of money. But if God talked so severely against equal weights and measures, you would think that he wouldn't have had a double standard when it came to women and men in scripture, but he does. Women aren't allowed to have multiple husbands.
Right.
Women aren't allowed to do XYZ. If a woman has a son, she's unclean for 40 days. But if she has a daughter, she's unclean for 80 days. There's a huge double standard there. That double standard alone should have been a huge red flag for people, as following this, to say that's not a just God.
Yeah. Scott Daniel, I totally rock with this. I got 999 problems, and this concubine ain't one. Hallelujah. He's a trip. No, I definitely, you can draw your morals. I guess my moral of that story is you can draw your morals from the Bible where you see fit.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean,
you can make any stance on, that you want. If you want to make a specific argument using the Bible, you absolutely can. And it doesn't matter if you're trying to justify having more than one wife, or if you're trying to justify murder. You can make that case in the Bible.
And now, knowing about King David, if you're struggling, this is the sad part. I got a really good friend I grew up with. I always knew that he was, he wasn't straight, but he could not say it. Right. Because he and I were in extreme Christianity. Like I say extreme, like speaking in tongues, prophesying, like, like homosexuality was a spirit. It was a demon. It was that was what we were believing. Yeah. And he would get laid on of hands to try to cast this thing out. It was ridiculous. Let's just put it that way. I can't even go into how ridiculous this is. But for years and years, finally one day he calls me, or I call him, because he didn't talk to me for years. I went off working, taking care of life, and he got married to a guy. And I called him to congratulate him. Now I'm already exiting Christianity. This is like 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah. And he's like, "Well, Derek," this was his first answer to me, not lying, "the Bible does not condemn it. I tried telling my mom, but she won't listen to me, Derek. Maybe you could talk to my mom and tell her that the Bible isn't against it." And I'm like in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I personally read this and it does. Mm-hmm. I mean, but I saw that he was stuck in a catch-22. He believes Christianity's true and Jesus is Lord. Simultaneously, he really is in love with a man and he wants to be who he is. And he's battling back and forth.
Well, why in the world, why did God send an evil spirit to King Saul to kill David? Was it because of this homosexual attraction that David had? We don't know. But the case could be made.
You got a point. Yeah, like why would God send the spirit on Saul because Saul was jealous? No, like in fact, this tells you who the culprit for making Saul want to kill David is, and it's God.
Right.
Which is the plot thickens even more, right? It's like, what's going on here?
Hey, we got to bring it full circle. This is the title of your show here right now.
That is true. It's funny how you kept bringing it back to David because there's so much you talk about in this book that isn't even that topic.
Right.
everything from blood magic to contradictions between the Hebrew. Continuing your story, that's what we were doing.
Yeah, we dropped off when I was telling you that's how we met. Like I was in Ohio in the middle of tail end of one of the worst ice storms they had. It was like 16 below zero or something. And Valentine's Day came and went, and nobody reached out to me, and I was throwing myself a pity party. And so I signed up for Christian Mingle. And there's actually, at the time, there was a ticker for Hebrew Roots.
Oh, wow.
So I clicked it. Well, and I said I was in Colorado because I was like, well, I want to meet somebody and I want to get to know them before, getting that endorphins or that euphoria that you feel with. And I didn't want to mix this emotional feeling and have it overshadow somebody's true heart for God. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to say I'm in Colorado. That way there's enough time to get to know somebody before meeting them in person. And so Mark was on Christian Mingle, and he said he was in Colorado because he wanted to move to the States, but he wasn't in Colorado either. So neither of us were in Colorado.
So both of you Christians were lying and full of shit.
Well, I mean, we both admitted it right away. We're like, I'm actually not. I just want you to know we put, so we both had the exact same story. We want to get to know somebody first before meeting them in person. And so we were up front right away. And he's like, no, I'm in Puerto Rico. I'm like, no, I'm in Ohio.
I lived in Puerto Rico. Where was he at in Puerto Rico?
He has, his family he's half Puerto Rican. Okay. And so he was finishing up an obligation to help his dad with renovations. And so. You
don't know the city or anything?
Yeah, he was in Jalco at the time. And, okay. Well, Jalco and Patias.
Okay.
So.
Interesting. Side note. Okay. So now you're dating or talking to a person who has a similar faith as you.
Yes.
And you both are serious about this.
Yeah. Like we vetted each other for a month before even bringing up emotions. And at the end of that month, he flew out to Ohio and proposed, and then went back to Puerto Rico. And then 2 months later flew out again, and we were immediately married. So we only had in each other's presence 6 days before getting married. That is how hardcore we both were in our faith. It was not about any kind of chemistry, really. It was about, we're both on fire for God. We're both this hardcore in our faith. We're both this dedicated to being the child of the Most High King and a warrior for God. That was it. That was why we got married.
And did it have anything to do with Paul saying, if you burn for one another at all? Like, was it like, we also don't want to sin, so let's make sure we.
Yeah, well, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
But in all transparency, neither of us were each other's type.
It was Jesus that brought you together.
Right.
Hallelujah. So so both of you are married, serious, devout, going to a Hebrew Roots church at this time?
Well, we were watching some teachings online because I don't think there are any English speaking Hebrew Roots communities in Puerto Rico. And the first 6 months of our marriage, we were living in Puerto Rico with his parents while he finished up that renovation project that he had already committed to. And then we moved to the United States, and we were watching these teachings online, continuing to watch them online. And we drove down to Charlotte to be, one morning we left at 3:00 in the morning to get there at the time of the teachings on a Passover weekend, so we could be there live. And the rest is history. We followed a couple of different congregations almost simultaneously because, one offers this and this offers this. And, one of them's more geared toward this demographic and one of them's more geared toward this. And we're of the younger age, and so we got a lot from both of them. And neither of us are conformists. So when certain things were starting to well, that doesn't line up really with scripture, because scripture actually says this.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them, within, I think, a year of each other, both said, you guys probably don't need us. You should probably find other churches, because we challenged them.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't like it.
That's you were a thorn in their side, like I was to the Presbyterians when I brought full preterism, and I was calling out their Calvinism because they weren't consistent. They wanted to make avoid God from being guilty of any creation of evil, and I didn't think he was guilty. I thought God could do whatever God wants. He's God, right? That creates other problems, but they weren't being consistent. So I'm with you. I see what you mean. Like we were problems in our congregations. Real quick, a super chat, and then back to the story. Scott Daniel, thank you for the super chat. My grandparents got into Messianic Judaism in the 90s, and I always wondered how they squared it with Hebrews. How did you square that circle?
Which part of Hebrews are we talking about? Because there's a few different issues in Hebrews. There's one of my first writings was about the new covenant, and there's a scripture in Hebrews 1, I think it's verse 11, don't quote me, but it's in the first part of Hebrews, and then again it circles back in several chapters later, talking about what waxes old. And when you talk about the old covenant waxing old, if you read it in context, it's not talking about the covenant waxing old, because God calls his covenant everlasting, and everlasting doesn't wax old. So what it's actually talking about is the earth, heaven and earth, because there would be a new heaven and a new earth. And even Jesus confirmed that. And that's how I squared Hebrews with Hebrew roots, was that it's not the old covenant that waxes old, it's heaven and earth. Jesus said, till heaven and earth wax, fall away, not one jot or tittle. So we still have heaven, we still have earth. We're not getting rid of the old covenant. In fact, when you look at the prophecies of the new covenant, we're not even in the new covenant.
So he said generally the idea that returning to the law was crucifying Christ all over again. Was that in Hebrews?
Okay.
I didn't look that up, because I know in Galatians it seems to be implied, or at least seems, but see, Hebrews is not written. We don't know who wrote it, but doesn't seem like Paul wrote it. I don't know. Right. Do you know this one off the top of your head from Hebrews?
Okay, so it's talking about, from what I gather, it's talking about intentional sin. And intentional sin, there is no sacrifice for, ever. Throughout the entire Bible, there is no sacrifice for intentional sin. There's only sacrifice for unintentional sin. And so that was part of my daily battle, was making sure that I didn't sin. And sure, if you take it day by day and you're like, okay, I am not going to sin intentionally today. Seems pretty easy. I'm not stealing land. I'm not lying. I'm not cheating. I'm not being unclean. I'm not eating shellfish. I'm not doing this. You just, okay, I can be sinless for a day. I can be sinless tomorrow, and I can be sinless the next day. So to me, that wasn't hard once you've, given yourself
you're completely obsessed. Yeah.
Right. When it consumes your every day, to me, it was like, okay, well, unless I actually intentionally sin, I'm good.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I totally know what you mean. And that's a problem in the whole once saved, always saved arguments too, that are out there, but it's a whole nother. Okay. Your husband and you are married. You're devoted, but you are a pain in every Hebrew roots society you get a part of. but, because you just keep finding situations and issues that you're like, well, how do you address that? I think this.
Well,
What do you think?
it wasn't necessarily even big things. Initially one of the congregations had a young guy come forward, and he said, yeah, okay, I'll lead this congregation, but I'm not taking the title pastor because, Jesus said, call no man rabbi. Okay. I'm like, cool. This guy is down to earth, legit. He's trying. He might be young, but that's okay. We can learn from anybody. And then a few months later, he took the title of pastor, and we called him out, and he's like, go find some other congregation, basically.
So you called him pastor when you wanted to call him rabbi.
No, we didn't want to call him rabbi either. We didn't like no title. Like, don't take a title. Look at the template from the book of Nehemiah, where Ezra gets up on this platform that they built, but he has 13 guys behind him. He doesn't call himself a pastor or rabbi. He's just reading from the law. Mm-hmm. And we had initially in that congregation, it was, interaction with the people that they would read Torah. Well, and then that stopped. And so it's like, so now you're taking the title pastor. You have nobody you're answering to. You don't have a group of 13 guys behind you that are keeping you accountable. And you're removing this interaction with we're like, nah.
So you leave.
No.
Let me ask you this. Let's cut to the chase here.
Yeah.
What happened? We're not to the conclusion yet, but to the chase of Hebrew roots to legit Judaism, or if I could use it, Orthodox Judaism, or a form of actual Judaism and not Jesus in the picture. What happened to make you do that?
Well, that was the very first domino, was that pastor issue. And then it was tithing, and it was the new covenant. And at the end of that, I came across that series of videos, right? And I can post it in the comments below, because I know several people have asked.
What is it? What is the series of videos? The series of videos
by Scott Shube from Violates Productions. It's BEIT TEFILLAH Productions. Scott Shube, SCHUBBE, I believe. And that series of videos was very shortly after those three topics that I went over: the tithing, the pastors, and the new covenant.
Is it SCHUBE?
SCHUBBE.
And then the title, I'm sorry, one more time. I'm going to pull it up and post it.
That's okay. Biet Tefillah Productions. BEIT TEFILLAH Productions.
Let's see. Oh, it's like a 15-part series, The New Testament Unveiled, right?
Is it 15? Because it used to be 7.
Is it The New Testament Unveiled? The thumbnails are white?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah,
I got it. I'm going to share that. This is the first among many.
Yeah, that was when I watched that first video. That was it. And then for the next, 4 or 6 months, we were like, okay, well, we need to convert to Judaism now, because obviously the New Testament's trash. And so both of us, we were on the same page. I came home. I had listened to that first video at work. I came home. I'm like, I need you to watch something. He watched the first one and said, I'm done. That's it. He made enough of a case in one video for both of us to be done.
Done with Christianity.
Done
Any
with
form
the New
of
Testament.
it. Right. Okay.
Done with the New Testament. And so we looked at the I forgot the name of it. There's a type of Judaism that starts with a K, I believe. And we were looking at the Noahide laws, and as much as a Nazarite, I think is what it is, that we could come across something that was as genuine and as close to the Bible without getting into oral tradition. Because we were like, I don't want any more tradition. I don't want anything added. I don't want anything that's not canon. I want that.
Mm-hmm.
And how much of the Hebrew can I learn? Like, I need to start taking classes on how to read Hebrew. I need to get to it.
Your obsession for
Karaite. We were trying to
Karaite. Okay,
Karaite. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Your obsession, if I could phrase it this way, your obsession with the truth and God and your experience and attaching that to the idea. You were just shifting your idea, but everything was still true based on your experience, that you were on the right path and that you're going to figure it out. Real quick, we have an announcement by Flip. I thank you, Flip, for the super chat. Covenant waxes on, covenant waxes off, covenant waxes on, covenant waxes off. Karate Kid, biblical edition. Hallelujah, my friend. Hallelujah. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that.
Oh, I love that. And that's a perfect flip one. Okay, got it.
Flips a trip.
Back and forth. That's perfect.
Yeah. Wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off. Karate Kid edition. Yeah. I really appreciate that. Seriously. That's funny. So you're taking that dedication and you're like it, because your foundation is Abrahamic. You realize, all right, we don't need this New Testament. You're looking at Karaite Judaism. You're looking at Nazarite. I don't know. Maybe that wasn't what you were looking at. Maybe you were looking for Karaite in your head, but you were looking into the Noahide laws.
Yes.
Tell us what happened here. What'd you do? You're a Gentile. You're a Goyim.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Well, but here's the thing. How I actually squared it in my head was when the people of Israel left Egypt, it says there was a mixed multitude. And not just that, but it goes on to say that those who were sojourning with you, if you were Israelites, if you were Hebrew, and those who are sojourning with you and practicing like you are practicing, you are not to treat them any different
than native born.
They were native born.
Yeah.
Because at one time you were in Egypt and you were a slave. So don't treat them any different. And so I actually, had a few online conversations with people. They're like, you're not Jewish. And I'm like, go read that scripture. Right. Like, you don't get to do that to me. And then I found out my husband's family, where they did a DNA and they found some Hebrew in their roots. and then there was this document that went into the Holocaust survivors, and I had done a ton of genealogy on my side of the family and found out that over half of the last names on my side of the family had records in Holocaust survivors. So without doing DNA, I was like, I got it.
Yeah.
It's in my roots. It's in my blood anyway.
So you're special even more now because the ethnocentricity of the religion. Sure. So you are now like, you're an elite. You're way up there now. It seems.
Right. So on my husband and on me, and we're like, it's there. There's a reason why my mom and me always felt a closeness and a kinship and an empathy toward the Jewish people our whole lives. And so to me, it was just like, not only do you have the scriptures that tell you don't treat me any different, but now I've got this too.
Yeah.
So it was that much more important to me. And that was why it was so hard to vet the Hebrew scriptures. And that was hard for me.
So you went from a sojourner and realizing you weren't a sojourner, you were one of the native born, and in your head, of course. And so you didn't have to justify, well, there was, they came out with them, and there's actually I've heard someone make the case that the reason that there was golden calf worship was because these sojourners brought their gods with them or something. I don't know. But anyway, that's a whole nother discussion.
Right.
You were in the whole thing. So what happens next? Now you find out you have Jewish blood potentially. We know
Right.
he has something in his family.
Yes.
You guys are on the right path to becoming full-blown religious Jews or
Yeah.
practitioners. Yeah.
I reached out to Tovia, to Tovia Singer, and I told you that in this last video that we did. He sent me an email in response that said welcome home. I actually just found that email the other day too. I was like, I know I still have that. And I do. But it was beautiful, and then it was bittersweet. It was like, I want to know, I can't just have faith in something just because it's written down and it's old.
Mm-hmm.
I have to know. I have to vet this as much as I did with the New Testament. And there was too many holes in it for me to put all of my every egg in that basket, because that's what you do with your faith. It's every aspect of your entire life. It's your existence. It's your identity.
Right.
And I couldn't do that without vetting it.
And let's talk about the vetting process here, because this is where it gets fun to me. I started vetting, and when I vetted, people were like, well, hold on, you didn't vet Hinduism. Why didn't you check and make sure that wasn't the truth? And why didn't you check and make sure this unknown God that you've never heard the name of this religion on a tribe on an island, how do you know that's not the one? And it's like,
right.
Look, after you actually start to be critical and your expectations, your criteria for what is good evidence starts to be it doesn't match. It doesn't work. Right. What is your vetting process? What were the first things you saw red flags, if you can remember, on the Hebrew within the Bible without the New Testament that made you go, hold on, something's wrong? Do you remember the moment, or is there moments?
The first thing that I noticed in the Old Testament was probably Abraham and Isaac and the sacrifice that God asked Abraham to do. I was like, wait a minute. It says here in the scriptures that God told Abraham to offer up Isaac, his only son. But Isaac wasn't his only son. Ishmael was 14 years older than Isaac. And when I realized that, I was like, okay. So I get online and I start asking other people, well, what about this? And they're like, well, yeah, but Ishmael was of the slave. Okay. So the promise was with the non-slave. The promise was, and I'm like, well, that's kind of New Testament, but okay. And then it was probably a few months later that I realized, well, it doesn't matter anyway. Whether Ishmael was of a slave or not, I think there's 4 tribes of Israel that were born of slaves. So if you're going to totally dismiss Ishmael from being a son, a legitimate son, you're gonna toss out 4 tribes of Israel doing the same thing.
So just let's give people the context here, because you got to kind of know your Bible to really get what she's saying here. All right. Jacob. All right. He had 2 wives, of course. The one he had Leah and then Sarah, or Rebecca. I'm sorry. Rebecca was his love. He had to wait 14 years for her, I believe it was. And then, Leah, he had in 7 years he works. So he's working 14 years. He also has concubines. So while he's knocking up Leah, hoping Rebecca finally has his favorite son,
right?
Joseph, I think it is, or is it his son?
Joseph and then Benjamin.
Joseph and then Benjamin. Yeah. Later on, Benjamin pops up.
Yeah.
And Joseph's like, no, I'm going to keep him, your favorite son. Anyway, because that was his favorite wife. Interesting how favorites play a role. But there were concubines who had children, which ended up becoming the children of Israel, part of the 12 tribes. So here you have a slave woman giving a child to Jacob. Yet when Abraham has a slave woman bear his son, that's not counted as his firstborn. But over here, Jacob can have them. And these are leaders of the tribes of Israel, and their names are relevant. Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah. And for me, when I'm hearing, or when I'm reading the Bible and I'm reading this story, God says, sacrifice Isaac, your only son. That just means God just lied. Either that, or he's if you look at the book of Jubilees, which is an extra biblical writing that didn't make it into the canon, it wasn't God who came up with the idea of offering Isaac. It was Mastema, which is the adversary or Satan or whoever. And so it was him. Well, either way, if God, right, if God did it, then God lied. If Mastema did it, then God allowed for this testing. And you can't make a test through Satan as Abraham being righteous. So you have a problem either way you spin the story. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't line up. That was the first thing that made me realize the Hebrew scriptures don't have it right either.
Real quick, I appreciate the super chat, Jim Johnson. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. It helps us here. No questions. Just appreciate the content and your effort. Thank you. You are wonderful, by the way, Deborah. I mean, I seriously mean that. Like, this is amazing. I love this. I love this conversation. We're still getting there. I want to ask before we continue in the Hebrew scriptures of like different problems you might have seen, but did you have conversations with critics at this time? Because like for me, I can't imagine I would have come up with this just by reading my Bible by myself and thought those questions. Maybe there were people, trying to tell you like, you need to vet that too then, or was this all you and your husband just reading your Bibles and thinking with common sense? Because I didn't have common sense when I was a Christian. I'm going to be honest. I couldn't think critically like this. I didn't.
Well, the thing is I have a very analytical, logical mind. When I did my CSATs in high school, I scored a 99 out of 100 for technical professional. So I already have a technical mind.
Yeah.
My dad was very, very technical.
I can see that.
So
lots of good stuff.
Right. So when it switched, all of a sudden I allowed my mind to start thinking critically against the Bible. And I had already done so much writing for the validity of the scriptures that when I started pulling out all those writings and notes and this Facebook note and those notes in my binders and all these writings, I started pulling them up and I'm just like, I have new questions and I have new eyes to look at all this stuff. And wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. And wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. And it just started snowballing and clicking in my head. And it just one thing went after another. And it was just like this floodgate that opened up. And I wasn't reading Richard Dawkins. I wasn't reading Christopher Hitchens because that wasn't on my allowed reading list as a Christian. So 41 years in Christianity, you're not reading anybody else's stuff that's critical of the scriptures because you're not allowed to. So,
thank you for saying what I've been saying about the whole me. I had that problem. I didn't listen to, even when I'd listened to the debates, I admit this. And people think that's embarrassing. Why would you admit that? I'm being honest when I say very rarely did I actually want to listen to the other atheist that was talking. I wanted to hear John C. Lennox, William Lane Craig. I wanted to hear the Christian do the debate and win. Even when I heard rabbis debate Christians, I wanted to skip the rabbi. I wanted to get to the Christian guy. I wanted to hear how he dealt with it and like not actually deal with things that might have hurt my worldview. So I feel what you're saying.
But I never watched anybody's debates, even in Christianity. I was just listening to Chuck Swindoll and all these other big names who had Beth Moore and Joyce Still, I think her name was, and all these other authors and reading Pilgrim's Progress and Hind's Feet and Hind's Plate. Those were the types of books that I read back then. I didn't read anybody else's things, but I do have a very critical, analytical mind. And so when the floodgates opened, oh my gosh, did the floodgates open?
Yeah, man. Okay. Firstborn son was of a bondwoman, which that's the argument in the New Testament. It seems like this is a clear argument that Paul and the New Testament authors are using. Oh, well, that wasn't really the son, that was of the bond servant. So
Sure.
so they're using the same thing.
Sure.
What other Hebrew scripture ideas maybe red flagged you? Can you remember of any of them?
Well, it went back to Genesis. So, we talked about that in my first interview with who was really at fault in the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and as I got through the shock of, I don't think the Hebrew scriptures really have it right either. That's when I started engaging in some conversations online. I had somebody kept telling me that the Jesus sacrifice was a human sacrifice. That's a human sacrifice. That's a human sacrifice. I'm like, no, he wasn't. And that was right before the whole snowball effect happened. But when you look at, who was that guy who made a vow with God and then ended up burning his daughter alive?
Jephthah in Judges 11.
Right. I was looking at that and I was like, how is that right? How is that even acceptable? That doesn't even make sense. And then I was like, well, wait a minute. What does God have to say about it? Oh, nothing. He didn't command it. He didn't. Well, then how is it that all these scholars keep bringing that up as an excuse or as some sort of foreshadowing? I'm like, well, what is this whole foreshadowing thing? Is that even a phrase in the Bible? That's how my mind just kept going and kept going and kept going. It was
wow.
One thought led to another and led to another and led to another, and it was just overwhelming. I had to put it down for I don't know, 6 months. I just put all of my work down and stepped away and I need a break. Just too much. Too
I think anybody who's looking into this, like we were, like, you have to admit, for people like us, when we were in this experience attached to ideas of Christianity and Judaism, like the story of Abraham going to sacrifice his son, firstborn, only begotten son, right? It was just too neat the way the New Testament wanted to package Jesus as this sacrifice. And it opened up a paradigm for Christianity to just be able to harp onto that. Because how does Judaism deal with this? Well, it showed faithfulness on Abraham's part, that he was willing to kill his own son. Now, today we look at that and we're like, whoa, no. Right. I know a woman who drowned her 4 kids. God told her to do that.
And we're like, she needs to be in a padded room.
Right. So what are we doing here with Abraham? And this is another issue that gets brought up. Jephthah's daughter, like you said, like the way that Rabbi Tovia Singer was explaining this away, he said, no, it just meant she died in her virginity. Like they mourned her virginity. Like it just was like a vow for the rest of her life. She wouldn't, have sex. This is a common thing. I not only hear from Jewish apologists, but also Christian apologists. Mm-hmm. And they all want to say, no, that's not, you're not reading it correctly, or you're not right. Seems to me that's exactly what happened, is that he gave her a month to mourn that she'll never be with a man. And boom, committed to the action according to the story. Whether this ever historically happened, it seems odd that
she was the one that said, let it be as you vowed.
Exactly. Yeah.
So of her own words, she just said, yes, if you made this vow to God, we need to follow up on it, but give me some time to go say goodbye to my friends. Let me go mourn the fact that I'm never going to know a man. And then let's do it. Let's do this thing. That's how the scriptures are written.
Yeah. And we couldn't. Sorry.
No, I don't know how you can, even as an apologist, explain that away.
Yeah. I don't think I'm sure you can do anything if you really try hard enough.
Gymnastics if you want, but
Bart Ehrman said that.
Intellectual honesty.
Yeah, I had Bart Ehrman on to deal with contradictions in the New Testament, and I was like, isn't that a contradiction? He goes, finally, after like the 90th time I brought up a contradiction, he's like, Derek, listen, because Bart's patience gets tested after a while. He's like, Derek, if you want something to not contradict, you can make anything if you try hard enough. And these people are trying hard enough. So you don't have to try that hard to see the problem. You have to try very hard to not see the problem. And that's what's going on. Stop Scamming Man. Thank you for the super chat. Jewish scholars condemn, I think, JEPBK of Hebrew praises. Is that Jephthah? I don't know. Stop Scamming Man. Help me out here, my friend. I don't want to put words in your mouth. But I'll be looking for your comment. Thank you for the support. Yeah, Genesis. This always was a problem to me. He puts them in a garden where, in my understanding, God knew everything. I had an omni God, everywhere, all-knowing. He wasn't ignorant. Those were anthropomorphisms when it wasn't that. And long story short, yeah, he puts them in there, knows that the serpent's going to tempt them. And if they eat, they're going to die. And the serpent's like, no, that's not true. You're going to become like the gods.
And then says, hey, they're like us.
Yeah. So he literally, he didn't lie about that.
Right.
This is why Gnostics did what they did. And we're like, no. Sorry, the serpent was the Christ. There are people who argue that the serpent in the garden, of course, is very anachronistic, but that the serpent told the truth.
Sure.
I don't know. Did you see that, or is that something later on you just kind of?
Well, it was in writing the book, and in my studies after, as I'm exiting, and as I'm healing from that separation and that shift in my entire identity, I'm paying attention to what certain people are saying online, and I'm like, wait a minute. I got to go back and look at this, and I'm reading through it again, and I'm like, Satan didn't lie, or the serpent. It's not Satan. It's not Satan. The serpent didn't lie, and it's only the New Testament that makes that bold claim as to say that the serpent was Satan. But nowhere in the Hebrew language, nowhere in the Old Testament does it say that. In fact, when God curses the serpent and says, you're going to slither on your belly, right, the rest of your life, how is it then that this serpent that is now slithering on his belly with no legs anymore, how is he walking around in heaven with God and his sons in the book of Job?
Yeah.
I thought this serpent was supposed to be crawling on his belly. If he's Satan, how is he walking around in heaven?
And of course, there's always an excuse. Oh, that's a metaphor. That's an allegory. You don't understand the meaning of the story. This means that. You can make anything mean anything. I see it all the time in my chat, my comment section, on the side of our videos, for example. Yeah. I mean, it's endless speculation of this is the 7 stars, and that's this and that, and this means this. And anyway, Deborah, we have 380 people watching. 380 people watching right now.
Right.
That I hope will go get the book.
Yeah.
I mean, you have so much here to get into. And the Audible version as well, the ebook. On the ebook, these graphs are all there, right? Like everything.
Yes. The ebook has all the tables in it as well. The audio version doesn't read through the tables. So, if you understand the scriptures well enough and you know what I'm referring to as I'm writing, then it's fine. You'll know what scriptures I'm talking about when I bring them up in my writing, but it doesn't actually say the references in my writing. So that's all in the tables.
I definitely hope everybody goes and gets the book. I seriously appreciate you. I know we have way more to talk about. This is the book here, Crucifying the Bible. Their Audible, Kindle. Here's the Kindle version. Paperback. And get you a copy. Let's see. There it is. Big and nice and looks good. Go get the book. Go get a copy. I want to do more with you on this and talk about the subject even further. But as we're closing,
King David?
Huh?
More about King David?
Well, I think we kind of touched on that. I'm sure we can always mention it if people want to get into some of these discussions. But I would like to ask you, as we're on our way out here, if you could,
Yeah.
you now see the problems. You
Yeah.
start to realize there's more here. And once you see one, you see 10. Once you see 10, you see 100. Once you see 100, it's like, okay,
It snowballs. Yeah.
snowballs. How did you go from writing Tovia in an email to him saying, welcome home, to I'm not a believer? And did you have any other words with him, or is that confidential?
No, that was it. I didn't write him after that. I watched more of his videos after that, just because he's so calming, and I love watching his videos. But then it became painful when everything kind of came to a head, and I realized, you know what, the New Testament is not where it's at. I had to stop everything biblical. I couldn't watch him anymore. And I didn't really want to bother him. I knew he was busy, and his time zone, I think he was in Indonesia at the time, and I didn't want to bother him by trying to keep that communication line open via email. But I was going through my own dark night of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably about 6 months after I realized that the Bible just wasn't accurate enough to put my faith in, that I finally said, yeah, I don't believe anymore. I can't call myself a Christian. I can't call myself Hebrew roots. I can't call myself a Jew. I can't at all. And my husband was very supportive. Obviously, you can tell.
That was the question I had: is did the light go off in your head first, and then he saw it, or did you both at the same time?
On the same day, we both said the New Testament is no longer worth our time.
Now, what about the Hebrew Bible?
The Hebrew Bible, he was pretty much, as I was doing research and bringing it to him, he's like, you know what? I'm done. I've had enough. If you need more, you do you. But for him, he was done with the Bible probably in a month, maybe 2. And I needed a lot longer than that. I needed to analyze the heck out of it, inside and out, upside down, backwards, forwards, every which way I could analyze the scriptures. I needed to know that I wasn't tossing the baby out with the bathwater. And when I realized, well, it's all, it's anthology, but it's canon. I can't just pick this book and not that book. That's just cherry picking. And, it's all written by numerous authors over thousands of years, at least more than 1,000. I think with 1,500 years, the Bible was written.
It depends on your dating.
Right.
I mean, if you want to get frisky and you want to say New Testament, let's use New Testament and the Hebrew Bible. The New Testament, some of this literature maybe 2nd century. So you have 2nd century, and the furthest back you could go up to, maybe some words in there might go back to 1,000 years. But I say that like as if that's very conservative. People are taking that, but the typical critical scholars would go 7th, 8th century to maybe 6th, 5th century. And then there are more radical minimalists who would say, no, this is like 3rd century BC, some of this, and maybe a little older, but yeah, it just depends. So maybe, 800 year or something like that. It's a long time though.
Right. So I'm looking at all this and I'm like, I don't know what to trust. I don't know who to trust. None of it makes any sense anymore. It's all just speculation. It's all written by man. God didn't actually write it himself. We don't have stones to see his. He hasn't shown up in the sky to say, yes, this is my word. Follow it. And I'm like, well, that was a revelation for them. So if they wanted to take it as God and they wanted to follow it, cool. But it's not saying that this is for Deborah.
Yeah.
And I can't use it as a benchmark. And none of it seems to be moral anymore anyway. So
Yeah, that's a tidal wave was coming on you. Your
right.
husband's already done watching football, probably with his
Yeah.
legs kicked up, while you're sitting
Yeah.
here going, Numbers chapter 3. What the heck?
Yeah. I'm just spinning my wheels for I had to get away. I had to go to a mind and body retreat for a weekend and recenter and come back to grounding. And I was already more of a naturalist in that respect, so it made sense for me to just Deborah needs her own like girl spa weekend. Let's let her go do that. And so my husband's like, yeah, go. If you need to go. And I'm like, yeah, because I need to stop spiraling. And then I let it be until I wrote a couple of books last year. They need art. And then I just kind of sat up in my chair one day and said, I know what to write. No, that was the other book. That was the other book that needs art. This one was in response. I was responding to my sister one day. She was talking about the pandemic might be tied to Revelation, and I started writing her, and I'm like, I'm just started a book.
Wow.
And I'm like, I have enough information about it, and my story seems relevant, and I think there's space in the market for me, and I'm just going to go for it.
I am amazed. I'm impressed. I really am. You're brilliant. Keep up the good work. Keep going, for freedom and for equal rights. And
right.
I mean that all the way through and through, as you know. And I hope to have you come back and tell your wonderful husband, thank you for allowing you to give us your time. I mean, it's not every day that a woman gets to come hang out with a guy on a podcast, so, but seriously, Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And, it's in discussion that my husband might actually contribute to my next book.
Well, we're going to have to, that means he has to join now. He can't he's going to have to join us on camera. So
I know. Yeah. So we'll see. He's talked about it for a while, so I'll have to see if he follows through on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it might be incentive now to get him there.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to be meeting you in person at some point. So
we'll have to go out and you bring your wife and I'll bring Mark and we'll go and have some drinks.
Yeah. Well, my wife will. I don't drink anymore, but
that's right.
But that's okay. I have nothing. It's not a religious issue. It's just I'm allergic. Every time I drink, I break out in handcuffs. I just choose not to drink anymore.
Well, I'll just throw some mint leaves into some club soda for you.
There you go. I'll take it. Seriously, thank you. Everybody who's watching, take the time, go get the book, Crucifying the Bible. I'm highly impressed. Amazing story. We probably scratched the surface, but because we're an hour and 47 minutes in, it's time to wrap things up. So seriously, get the book. I have it right here in person. It's amazing. The charts are amazing. She writes very clear without bloviating and just gets straight to the point and makes you see it. And you're like, oh, wow.
Well, I did that on purpose. That was actually a couple of people. My marketer read a couple of my chapters and he said, make sure you just try to keep it concise and to the point, because you already have an idea who your audience is going to be, and get to the point. So and I listened to that and I said, okay, well, my next book will be a little bit more in-depth and heavy, so I can do that.
Wow. Yeah, please do. I just put the link in the comment section. It's also down in the description of the video. If you're watching this and you're not able to see the chat or you're not live, check it out and really go support her. Give her a reason to come back. That's what I like to see. And consider becoming a patron. Consider joining, helping us out here, bringing more freedom to people's minds, which in
Yes.
effect brings more freedom to the world, period, physically. It's not just mentally, but physically. Look, women keep silent in the church. Anyway, there's so much here. You can message me personally, help us out here, consider doing so. And with that being said, never forget, we are MythVision.
Don't any of you have the guts to play for blood?
I'm your huckleberry. That's just my game.